the corner, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so.
We have a recorder issue, just letting you know, but it's being recorded on the phone right there. So if everyone could speak up, we're trying to remedy that as well.
For the benefit of the commissioners that were not here in our last meeting, which was Tommy and Steve, I do believe you've been notified, but just for edification, we did have an election. I was elected chair and Marvin was elected vice chair. And so currently, unless without objection from the members who are not here, we'll proceed with that. But I mean, because you were not here, I wanted to at least inform of the election process.
I don't have any objection, but I did want to note that in the first meeting, we decided not to take a vote because 3 of the members weren't there. And 3 of the members weren't there in the second meeting, but the vote was taken, which from a perception standpoint can raise some questions about discrimination or whatever. And it tends to help raise, people's eyebrows a little bit. So I just want to send out a cautionary note that if we're setting a policy in one meeting, we shouldn't change it for the second meeting, regarding having an election. Because the intent in the first meeting that was stated, I think you stated it, was that, it would be better if everyone was here to have the election. So I just want to get that on the record, just to help prevent, some of the perception issues down the road that could come up by changing things from one meeting to the next.
So noted. Tommy?
Yeah, for the record, I'd like to compliment the commissioners for choosing new leaders, and I think Steve and I will give you our full support based on our previous experience. And if you need any help in any direction in any way, we'll provide that as well, so that we can continue to move forward with the agenda at hand. So thank you very much for serving.
Thank you. Just as a side note, and clarification, Doc.
Yes.
In regards, I know we can't address any new business on the agenda, but in regards to item 10, which essentially is announcements.
Yes.
What I'd like to initiate is prior to me adjourning, is the commissioners will go around the table, and the commissioners will have an opportunity for their comments that are not discussed within the agenda, or if they feel there's additional items or business that was within the agenda that we need to make sure to carry forward, that you'll have an opportunity to express that. I think that'll be important. So if we could do that in just more of a protocol in regards to how we manage ourselves. In the interest of time, what I would ask is if we could, when we do, good morning, Margaret, welcome. When we do have presentations or reports, what we're attempting to do is not necessarily streamline them, but attempt to keep the subject matter to the individual items that are at hand. And then if we should have need for further discussion, I have asked Margaret for a determination, and we'll have and if time permits, actually we'll have to put that on a new agenda, because that's actually new business. But anyway, the intent would be, because some of these topics are extremely detailed in nature, and there's tremendous amount of talent within this committee, it sometimes becomes more difficult to get some of that work done within the commission meetings. So we'll have further discussion. That will definitely be when we talk about our next meeting date, time, and place. I do not believe, again, because it was agendized, that we have the ability to speak on that matter. Correct, Margaret?
As to not 8, 9, in terms of the working committee that we're discussing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I just wanted to indicate to you that what we're attempting to do is, hopefully, as Margaret had stated in her minutes prior, is to see how we can leverage our capacity as members and also be cognizant of the transparency, what you had indicated, Steve, but making it more, I guess the word including greater capacity and access to some of these things that we do. Okay, so we'll have that discussion. With that being said, is there any other items or in regards to the review of the agenda? If not, then we'll go to statements from the public. Are there any statements from the public?
No.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Item number,
Oh, I missed number 4.
yeah, I just noticed that.
It's been a day, guys, I gather this has happened.
Okay, so correction 5 would be item number, yes, and so everything just changes accordingly, and as Mike indicated, we have 2 10s, and that is our separate items, so if we'll correct that, I appreciate it. So 6 will be 5, 7 will be 6, 8 will be 7, 9 will be 8, 10 will be 9, and 10 will be 10. So we had the initial 10, we have 10 items.
Oh, boy.
I apologize. So folks, review and approval of minutes. We have 2 meetings that we need to review. We'll take the time to review them, please.
It's the Hilo one. It's the worst.
I just have one that I found was more of a spelling is on October's meeting on Joy Cash's comments. I believe it's Marin, M-A-R-I-N.
Okay.
I didn't check if there was a Marin, but I know there's a Marin.
Okay.
And the only reason was the context with Sonomas, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Recorders, do I have one? Yeah.
I never used it. Maybe,
going to tell you, I was late because I'm double booked for the planning commission meeting. I'm building G.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But, that's why Dot said you're gonna be on property, but you may not be here.
Yeah, so they were wrapping up, so it's okay.
Oh,
For
thank you.
once, yeah, but
Wow.
normally it lasts a lot longer.
Thank you for joining us. Anyone else needs more time? Has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes? Good. So we'll take this in two separate motions because we have two separate meetings. So could I have a motion for the September 20th, 2013 minutes?
So moved to approve the September 20th, 2015 minutes.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Goya and seconded by Commissioner Min. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The second set of minutes, we have a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve with the amendment of the Marine.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Bowles, is there a second? Second by Commissioner Kulikini. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Thank you. We have a presentation today, and thank you, Calvin, for making the arrangements. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Calvin Kahatsu of Hawaii Electric Light. And just to prep the presentation, one of the important components in our fuel reduction strategies was to implement a comprehensive GPS EVL telematics program. And in 2008, we implemented that program in the Hawaii Electric Light fleet. And give a quick summary. 2 years later, we did the analysis and we reduced our fuel consumption by 9%, which is approximately 40,000 gallons. A comprehensive GPS system allows you to do a lot of data collection, so you can make a lot of detailed decisions on We have Ryan Clifford from Zonar Systems with us this morning. And I guess, Ryan, you're the National Accounts Manager.
That's correct.
So with that, Ryan, I'd like to introduce you to the group. This is the mayor's information.
I have a question. Are there any residual benefits to the GPS that you could tell us about?
Residual, meaning?
Safety, security?
Yeah, all of the above, and
Availability.
Ryan's gonna be detailing that in his presentation. But yeah, we've seen a lot of reduction in vehicle incidents, especially major collisions. We have run for many years now. There's a whole lot of stuff, and Ryan will go over a lot of that too.
A short answer to that is that often you might get into something like this for a variety of reasons. Usually there's some incident, be it a terrible accident, or fuel spend is really high, or compliance is down, there's a lot of roadside violations. So whatever that may be, that's the catalyst to look at something like this. It can be a lot of different things. But as you said, there's a lot of residual benefits too. And actually, Kelvin, I don't recall what the catalyst was for you. I mean, you first look into it.
Well, to use the GPS data to make better purchasing decisions. We can track tire mileage, fuel mileage, just a whole lot of stuff. One of the incidences we had in was 07 or 08 was we had a lone worker, a trouble inspector that does 24/7 work. And at around 2 in the morning, he was climbing a pole in Craigwood Pond to do some troubleshooting. He fell off the pole. He was unconscious on the ground for hours until we, found out what happened. And the GPS, when we initiated in 08, we had a lone worker panic button. So those that work alone would have almost like a remote key fob on their button or on their pocket that they could hit, and would send the cavalry down. We would know where who's located.
So that was the catalyst in that case. And then as residual benefits, there was fuel savings and tracking drivers' gyro behaviors, are they speeding on the highways, and incidents have gone down, and all these other things that happen. So I would say that in pretty much every case, there's a lot of residual benefits. Things you don't expect to get out of it when you first start.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Any chance I could plug in down there?
You can. We can. Do you have a jump drive? Because I can put it on my computer as well.
I do.
Yeah. It's your call. That would be fastest.
You think so?
I do.
Let's say it real fast.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah.
And I'll ask a question during the interim was there any pushback on the GPS being implemented?
Prior to the implementation in July of 2008, I had a lot of conversations with both the management and bargaining unit people for the first half of the year, from January 2008 to June. And kind of letting them know what we were planning to do, how we were going to implement it, what advantages that we hope to gain by implementation of this program. So by July, a lot of people already had known at HELCO that we were going to be implementing this program. In July, when we rolled it out, we opened the conference room and we set up a lot of desktops and laptops so the employees could come to an all-day orientation and go onto the site and work the system to see, what's important to them, checking out. And yeah, there were questions about Big Brother and that type, but we took a position that we would not be using that data as a disciplinary tool. And we would do some coaching, we would do some counseling. But to date, we have not used it in any disciplinary action.
And the catalyst, do you think the catalyst was that accident that allowed it to just leapfrog all that pushback?
We were working on the GPS program from 06, from the time we implemented the D20 biodiesel implementation. And we knew that a comprehensive program would give us a lot of benefits. And that incident kind of helped push it a lot faster. I'd echo. I was thinking 2 to 3 years would be the research pilot session.
Okay,
This
so
wouldn't have
that,
helped in that incident, because the guy was unconscious, right?
I can manage this time, or you want to?
Did you want to put in?
I don't mind.
Okay.
No
I was
force
just
without it.
confirming that.
Just to control.
Yes.
The incident kind of pointed out the benefits of
Just the
doing something
answer.
like that, but that particular
I think so,
incident
you're
would have
right.
been resolved
It's easy.
with this equipment, right?
You can be the.
Yeah,
You said the guy was
You can be the
unconscious.
captain.
right?
We would have had emergency services to him a lot sooner.
Even with the GPS, without him pushing a button of any form?
Yes, we would have implemented a callback system whereby every 5, 10, 15 minutes, he would have to call back to respond. And if he didn't call back within that time, dispatch would try to contact him. If he can't contact him, then we would send out. Yeah.
So that was a policy change as a result.
And I want to compliment Kevin for, not for his rollout plan, but for including dialogue and education in the process, because I think that's the key to what we're doing here. We need to make sure that we establish a dialogue with people and provide for continuous education of the public to which we are serving in the area.
Can everyone see that okay? Okay. So we work with a lot of different fleets. I mentioned in just a side conversation earlier that on the islands here we work with Roberts Transportation. We got our start really in school bus. So monitoring children getting on and off the bus, making sure that the maintenance and compliance procedures were actually being addressed and utilized. Often you'll find in commercial fleets, you might have a lot of processes and procedures, but they're not actually being used. For example, a pre-trip inspection, it's really common just to sit in the cab of a truck or in the front seat of a bus and check and sign it real quick rather than actually getting out and doing a walk-around inspection. Of course, none of the fleets on island, I'm sure, but a lot of the ones that we come in contact with, and we're on about 2,000 fleets so far. So we've done a lot of work here in the islands. But the thing about commercial fleets and trying to become more efficient that's important versus, say, a lot of the public conversation about converting your own personal vehicles to Priuses or Teslas or Leafs, which is great, mind you. But the big difference is that these are vehicles, buses and trucks that burn far more fuel. They drive far more, 10, 12 hours a day, every day. And there's a lot of gridlock and on the roads as a result of having these guys out there. So the more efficient you can make them, there really are a lot of true community benefits and reduction in costs, taxpayer and private funding there. That being said, they're easy to ignore. When I drive down the highway, if I weren't in this industry, I'd probably forget that they were even there. One case study beyond HELCO here, the city of Sacramento, they went into this with some pretty common issues, but like we were talking about, they went into it first trying to improve their fleet maintenance and that pre-trip vehicle inspection that we were talking about. So they suspected that their drivers were routinely not performing their pre-trip inspections, but they didn't know. And you can't manage what you don't know. So they implemented Zonar, which verifies that the drivers actually get out. They have to scan a tag at every zone that requires inspection. So they required that first. So then they got guys actually doing the inspections on the trucks. Then there was a second piece of that, a residual benefit, if you will, where they said, okay, now the guys are actually inspecting the trucks. They're finding that there's a whole bunch of things wrong with them that they would have never known, right? So they did that, and now they're like, okay, how are we going to handle all these inbound repair requests that we have? So then they went, okay, let's integrate this with our fleet maintenance system. So now they've eliminated the log books that the guys had to write on. They verify they're actually doing the inspections. So that thing is all paperless. And now they're inputting that data automatically and electronically into the fleet maintenance system that creates work orders and then sends back to the vehicle to verify that that vehicle is in compliance. Because what happens is, if I report that there's a tail light out on a truck, that's a critical defect. You're not allowed to drive down the road like that. And if I'm caught driving down the road with a known critical defect, you're in violation and can be cited. So what has to happen is when a repair takes place,
the shop then has to notify the vehicle that, hey, this repair has been taken care of, and then that driver certifies which. They go down the road and now they're in compliance. So we closed that whole loop and did it paperlessly, which is pretty cool because, believe it or not, again, kind of like those things that are easy to ignore with the commercial fleets out there, they're also generating a ton of paper. And one of our customers in particular, they estimated 30,000 sheets of paper per day with pre-trip logbooks like that, hours of service logbooks. So drivers, they have to document their hours as they're going. Are they driving? Are they on duty? Are they off duty? Are they in the sleeper berth? And all those things amounted to 30,000 pieces of paper a day that we were able to eliminate completely. So another residual benefit, all these things that come up that you don't even think about when you go into it, and then come to find out that there's efficiencies all over the place. In the case of the city of Sacramento, they got into it for the inspection process like we were just talking about. So they verified they actually do it, and then we created a whole paperless system for them, much the same way the HELCO's done as well. And then here were some of the other benefits that they found. A 25% reduction in fuel, and that was actually calculated by a third-party organization that came in and audited the fuel prior and then the fuel after implementing. And like that quote says there, basically at the end of the day, they reduce idling, they got their routes more efficient, and now a fleet like HELCO or utility fleet, they don't have routes. They just go out as they need to. But on a bus fleet or on a garbage fleet, those trucks, they do the same routes every day. But you don't know, if you don't have a way to track them, you don't know if those are the best routes. You don't know if the drivers are actually driving the routes that you routed them to. They might be going their own way. And then further, they found that they were getting a lot of people who were doing unauthorized use of the vehicles. So maybe on weekends, they're taking the work truck out on personal stuff out to the lake to tow their boat, things like that. They were actually way more common than you think. And anyways, they resolved all that. They were able to eliminate 25% of their fuel usage in a short period of time. And I think that audit took place 6 months after they after they implemented Zonar. So those are pretty significant and cool things. Ultimately, Keith Leach, this was pulled from an article that he wrote about implementing AVL, and said that, he's like, as a result, we were able to save jobs in our department because we saved $2 million in that first year. So those are all this stuff can be a little abstract, but there's some real benefits to it there.
That's an annual number. 25% is a 12-month annual.
They found, right. I mean, I guess it could be computed at any time period, I suppose.
Okay.
But I think in this case it would be biannual because I believe they did it 6 months after.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
And then, as I say, I show there that automated work order creation. That's another thing. That's getting a little bit into the weeds of fleet, and I'm sure that a lot of you here aren't involved with fleet.
Say, Ryan, the 25% reduction in fuel, I'm just contrasting that against what Kelvin said. Was that 9% an annual number?
Yeah.
So, what do you attribute the difference in fuel savings in the two areas? Is it because of the way the vehicles are used? Are they used more frequently in Sacramento than HELCO, or?
It could be a little bit of both. So one is that the HELCO fleet actually has a lot of electric and hybrid vehicles. So then you're going to see a less of a reduction by this. Where, if on a fleet where they're running at 4 miles per gallon all the time, then when you start to change some of those driver behaviors, then the percentages go up higher. So it can be a number of things. It could be based on the type of vehicles that you're running. Maybe in this case, their drivers may have been way out of control. And I don't really mean to point them out that way, but they may have been where they were really speeding a lot of weekend use, a lot of idle time. So it's pretty variable, the results. And it also depends on how much you implement. So I can't speak for every system out there, but I reason to guess that you can go with something really basic, or you can implement all kinds of things.
So based on all the different customers that you serve with your systems, what's the range of fuel savings that you see on an annual basis?
I mean, we've seen and documented up to 40%. And so, again, that depends on where they were at the baseline, and then how diligently they could work through all those different reporting processes. The one thing I will say is that it's typical where we have all these different reports, and I promise I won't get into every last one of them because I probably bored you guys to tears. But typically you start with a few things. So we'll do like a phase one where say you're tracking idle time, you're working on the fleet maintenance, and you're working on drivers that are speeding on the highway. And then once that becomes like second nature, then you work on the next batch and the next batch. But the cool thing is that even in this case with a 25% fuel reduction, 99.9% of the time there's still return on investment out there that hasn't been captured.
What's defined speeding? Like, do you guys give a bandwidth, like 1 or 2 miles over is speeding, or is it just 5 miles over?
We actually leave it up to the users.
Okay.
So, and most fleets will have a policy. You know, okay, we allow a 3 mile per hour margin for error, or a 5 mile per hour maybe, but that's actually configurable by our users. But there is a documented.
What is HELCO?
Right at 55.
So
And at posted speed limit. So
Okay.
the system will even alert us if the guy's going 36 and 35 mile an hour. So
And then what do you do?
we counsel. We talk to guys. But you know, not at the 1 mile per hour, but when we
Okay.
see a pattern where we really are using like 10, 15 miles an hour past the speed limit.
Oh, so you don't counsel for 1 or 2?
No, not 1 mile an hour.
Okay, okay.
Sorry, Don.
It's okay.
And the one thing is just, since we're here with an energy advisory meeting, there is a market reduction, say the difference of going like 45 and 55 or 55 and 65, and then certainly even more so, and this I will actually get into a bit, if you're aggressively accelerating and then slamming on the brakes, you know, and those things, depending on the fleet, are more common in some than others. And I will say, I promise I'm not making this up, I was looking at Kelvin's fleet, and they actually were incredibly clean across the board. There weren't any like weird inspection things going on where guys were trying to find loopholes in the inspection process. By and large, there weren't really long idle times, and not a lot of heavy speeders either. And there's always going to be some, but by and large, compared to like fleets, they actually do a really good job. And that being said, there's probably more. You know, there's probably more stuff that we can start looking into. But those core things, they actually do really, really well. So these guys, one thing about City of Sacramento too, and I don't know all the details for you, but they have really strict regulations as far as emissions go. And so in this case, they created what they call their climate action plan, and they were able to utilize this, because I said it earlier too, like you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you have no idea what's going on out there, then the best you can do is just make an assumption and guess. And in this case, usually, once you start to look, you find it's not what you thought it was. And in this case, that was true, and so they were able to meet and exceed their plan.
Excuse me, Cliff.
Yeah.
Probably a question. You know, especially on class 3 and above vehicles, there's a corollary savings in regards to maintenance, tires, all that kind of stuff with reduction in fuel.
You know, one of the components we track is life cycle cost, so we know definitively $8,000 of vehicle will cost so much over a life of 7 to 10 years. And we make purchasing decisions based on the cost.
So it integrates in the matrix on driver behavior and also
And
the driver metrics that you.
Yeah, driver training is another component that
Okay.
we followed up on a great deal.
Thank you.
This slide here, idle time, this is actually really basic GPS stuff, and you can do it one of two ways. We connect into the engine compartment, and we can pull the data from there. So, you know, anything that you're getting from the engine, we can gather for you and then send an alert and do all that stuff. So we can do that with idle time and tell you how much fuel is being burned while the vehicle is not moving but is keyed on. We can do that with GPS too. So another way, if we're not connected to the engine compartment, if the vehicle's on, the unit knows that. And if it's not moving, because there's no GPS action going on, then that registers as an idle. And the reason I include it, even though it is very basic GPS tracking stuff, is because it's so easy. You know, this is one thing where often people just have no idea that they're doing it. In the case of a utility fleet on the mainland, they had a foreman who every morning would come out and he would start all 10 of the trucks for the guys on his crew. But that's the kind of guy you want to work for. The one that wants your truck to be warmed up when you arrive so you can hit the road. That being said, there were days when it might be 30 minutes before someone ever got into that truck. And even worse, there were days when the truck didn't even move all day and was running for 10 or 12 hours just sitting there. So in one conversation, and that happened every day, and in one conversation they were able to eliminate hundreds or even thousands of hours of idle time. So it's one of those things, the reason I include it is because just with a few conversations, you can really change people's habits just by making them aware of what they're doing. So in that regard, it's easy. That being said, it's also common to get into those habits. And in fact, I was at the airport the other night and it was hot. So I was running the engine, just sitting there thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I live in this, you know, and idle times and fuel reduction. And so I turned it off and all of a sudden I'm hot thinking, geez, like I get it now, you know? But the problem with that is I did that for maybe 15 minutes in a consumer vehicle. But if you're doing that across a fleet of 1,000 trucks that are burning 3 or 4 miles per gallon, that can really add up over time. So idle is, I call it the king of fuel savings. 1, because it's easy, and 2, because it's just so easy to fall into that habit of idling often. And fuel trending. Now this is what you actually were just talking about. So there's a lot of ways that we can do this. We can do it by vehicle manufacturer. So maybe you compare your Kenworths to your Freightliner trucks. Or you might compare a year. So your 2010 Kenworths versus your 2006 Kenworths. Or driver by driver that are driving more or less the same truck. And say 7 out of 10 of those are getting 8 miles to the gallon, but how come 3 out of those 10 are only getting 5? Those things, again, I have to keep saying it, it's important. I mean, it only sounds like 3 miles per gallon, but when you extrapolate that across big fleets that are driving day in and day out, it really adds up. So anyway, that's cool stuff. We actually are doing similar stuff with Goodfellow Construction, where they're using it for their yellow iron equipment, also, which is incredibly fuel intensive, those things. And sometimes they'll have the same situation where they'll have an excavator out running all day long and it only moves for 15 minutes. So those are real common things on fuel trending, and that can really impact purchasing decisions, like that side conversation that was happening there. And now this is changing driver behavior, and I equate this system, we call it virtual trainer. Other companies have something similar. I don't know how many, but there are things out there like it. And I equate it to like the seatbelt buzzer in your car. When you don't put your seatbelt on, it keeps beeping. In my car, it's incessant. And it keeps beeping. This is the same idea, where it's just alerting you to habits that you don't even realize you have. And right there, it shows a blue little speed. That's a warning. And then when that turns red, what happens is that means you're getting close to whatever that policy threshold is. And when it turns red, that means you exceeded it and a notification is being sent. Cool thing about this though, it's a few things. One is it's a self-management tool. So a driver can, at least if they're gonna break the rules, they know they're breaking the rules and there's just no way you can dispute it. But if not, if they see that warning and then slow down, it frees up management time where they would have to be going out there and having these one-on-one meetings. And also, it really works. I put my seatbelt on when that thing beeps and beeps and beeps because it drives me crazy. Same thing, when you see this alert, it actually does affect driver behavior. And one of our first sites where we implemented it, it was cement, concrete, ready-mix concrete company. And they saw, depending on the vehicle type, they saw between 2 and 4% decrease in fuel usage with no management. They admittedly said, they're like, we did not manage this personally, we just put them in there, and this is what we saw, between 2 and 4%. So it's another one of those things, you just don't even really realize what you're doing until someone alerts you to it. And remote diagnostics probably doesn't mean much if you're not involved in fleet. It's a term that's kind of in the weeds a bit. Basically what this is when your check engine light comes on. So you're driving down the road, your check engine light comes on, and you're like, damn it, you know, it's probably the timing belt is gonna cost me $3,000 to fix, and you kind of freak out a little bit. Same thing happens in commercial vehicles, only this is another policy situation that varies depending on the fleet. But one, if there's a check engine light, sometimes you're supposed to pull over right then and call it in. Or if it's a stop engine light, pretty much across the board you're supposed to pull over and call it in, because if you keep driving with a stop engine light, you might be doing thousands of dollars of damage as you go. In this case, what we can do is, because we are plugged into the engine, we can notify you right then. So back at the office, They see, okay, hey, a stop engine light came on truck 474. It'll tell you what's actually happening. Say, oh, it's just a loose gas cap. You can send a message out to that driver, hey, don't worry about it, it's just a loose gas cap, keep on driving. So as far as energy goes, this is one of those things where I show the picture up there of the bus that's really smoggy. Often that driver might not even know that that's going on. And certainly his manager probably doesn't know that that's going on until someone tells you, you know? And so this system, it'll take that all out of your hands. So you at least, whether or not you act on it is up to you, but at least you know what's going on out there. The other thing, as far as energy is concerned, often fleets are sending out trucks to assist these vehicles roadside, and then they get there and it's a loose gas cap, or it's something that easily could have waited, but you don't, if you have no visibility into it, you have no idea. And so what we're finding is with our customers, they're finding that they're getting the most savings on the trips that they don't make. It's kind of like when you go run errands and batching your errands together, instead of going to the store and coming home and then to the bank and coming home, you can put all those things together and do it in one trip and come back and save 5 trips in the process.
Excuse me, good.
Yeah.
So does it plug into your OPD too? I mean, OPD on a telemetric side?
So in commercial vehicles, so heavy duty trucks, it's a 9-pin connection. They call it the J-Bus 1939. And on light duty, pickup trucks and stuff, it's an OBD2. OBD2 is a little trickier than 1939 as far as reporting those trouble codes, because maybe I'm getting a little too far into the weeds, I keep saying that, but for every make of those OBD2s, a trouble code can mean something different, even from year to year or make to make. On 1939, it's all the same. So for heavy duty trucks, if it's code 574, it's going to be the same for every truck. OBD2, what we do is we actually just send the code. And then the fleet, when they get it, they actually have to go back and see what that code means. But for the heavy duty, we can tell you what that is. And then this is an example, if it worked for me, let's see. Okay, this one's an example. We developed that remote diagnostic system for Freightliner trucks, it's a Daimler Trucks North America company, so the same company that owns Mercedes. And they're using it, it's not a customer-facing thing, they're using it internally. So what was happening is they were getting check engine lights and stop engine lights coming on, and the people that had just bought their truck weren't taking them in for service to get looked at. So they were getting all these, what should be preventable warranty issues that were turning into really costly issues. So they're using our system, they install it at the factory, they call it Detroit Virtual Technician, but it's the same system that's on the HELCO fleet. When a trouble code comes up, it sends a notification to Detroit, and they have people that monitor the system right there. I think we're on about 70,000 of those trucks currently. And they determine right there, do we need to route this person to a service facility? If so, that's what they do. If it's severe, they'll route them right then and there. And if it's not, they notify the fleet operator and say, hey, this came on, this happened, but no need to stop. And they've already found that 80 out of 100 trouble codes that come across the system don't require roadside attention or a route diversion. All things that in a fleet that's really functional and proactive, 80 out of 100 times they would have been doing that. That's costing money and putting the vehicle down. So anyway, it's pretty cool stuff, that remote diagnostics. I know it'd be nice for me. if my check engine light came on and I actually knew what it meant, it would be nice. We're probably a ways away from that actually happening for most of us. And this is just a snapshot of all the things you can be saving on it. It even goes beyond that. For us, that maintenance piece is really big. That system we have that verifies the drivers go around and actually do the inspection and integrates with the fleet maintenance system and all that, that's actually pretty unique to Zonar. But all these things are really, they're easy ways that you can return on investment, make your fleet more efficient. That being said, you gotta walk before you can run. So there's only so many that you can attack at any one given time. But there's a lot of savings out there, but you don't know until you put something on and figure it out. And that's that.
Yeah, so I do have a question. Did you have a question?
So how much did it cost to implement the system at HELCO? What is that?
For 275. We had a previous GPS system that we traded in. with Zonar, so they gave us a 50% trade. So we got everything like half price. So what would normally cost $275 per unit, we pay half of that. So I think all in all, with all the hardware, the alerts and all the accessories and stuff, we probably spend about $60,000.
So I have a follow on that. So,
I was gonna ask.
And then there's a subscription fee every month.
but I asked this, the part B. The part B is what was your return on investment? What period?
Well, just
of
the
time?
initial one with that fuel savings. Yeah, so
No,
40,000 gallons times $4 a gallon, 160,000, we more than paid for the system and then some.
Within.
Within the
1
first
year.
year into.
Okay, I remember.
So, for the bang for the buck, this is what we found out.
Okay.
There's one thing that we're gonna be doing with HELCO soon. They haven't, it's an issue with IT and stuff, it's actually in the works now to integrate Zonar with their fleet maintenance system like I was talking about, to make it all paperless and everything. A return on investment item that's often overlooked is how long it takes to handle the logbooks, put those into an electronic format. So out of the 700 logs, now we have to go through them all, find out how many defects were in there, put them into the system, and then put that into another system. So all that's gonna take place. But one thing is, I don't know how many work orders HELCO generates a year, but say you generate 2,000 a year. And then we can reduce that time of entering all that data by 3 minutes or 5 minutes or more per 2,000 work orders.
Automatic.
And how much you pay that person, maybe it's a shop foreman who's making 40 or 50 or $60 an hour. That's another quick return on investment, residual benefit that you wouldn't really think of when you do it.
Or I see just being able to manage the downtime and getting the alerts if there's a particular vehicle, that
If you
needs
can
more
imagine,
attention.
there's just 2 people running HELCO Fleet. It's myself and Alicia. We couldn't do it unless we leverage technology the way we have.
Question, very Cliff. Do you really need to be a data freak in order to manage a system like this?
It's easy for me to say no, because I live in this system all the time. So that's why I try to point out the easy ones first. Because usually what happens is when you get those easy ones, so say the idle, you can run that report and you can just sort a column that'll show you the people in your fleet that are idling the most. You can have those discussions with those drivers, and that part's real easy. The further you get into it though, so once you capture the easy ones, and then you want to get a little bit further into it. So in the case of say HELCO, okay, we've eliminated idling, but now we have bucket trucks with linemen and their engines running while they're up servicing a line. That's justified. But now we need to break out, what's unjustified idling versus justified idling. So then you get into the data a bit more. But the big things are really pretty easy.
In addition to what Brian said, we have it set up so that when those alerts go out, idle, speeding, it gets transmitted directly to their supervisor on the phone. So someone doesn't have to read the report. It automatically gets transmitted to that particular department supervisor. So
it's the lowest level of management.
Yeah, to the frontline supervisors. We got that set up.
So you don't have to be there mining data all the time.
Correct. It's automatic.
So that's the important, when you implement it, it's really important to decide what it is you need to know, and then we can just set up the system and automate a lot of that. So you're actually often not even having to go into the system. It's just telling you, hey, driver X went 8 miles per hour over the speed limit, or driver Z is still idling, and it's been going on for 30 minutes now, and we can alert you that way.
Right, so how does taking Tommy's first comment on the education and awareness and integrating that with the goals of management, when you folks implement, how do you actually help people who essentially have the capacity to manage these behaviors and have them understand how to use the technology to assist them? I think that is an important question in regards to not only the data, but the technology savvy of the user themselves. I'm pretty sure, although you guys get high-tech training, there's some people who are not that computer literate, right?
Correct.
So
that interface,
Yeah, so it happens a number of ways. The one is that we're always improving the user interface to make it as easy as possible. I guess that probably goes without saying. The other, from a training standpoint, it's the hardest part.
And we actually have a team designated just for that, because after 2,000 implementations, we learned, okay, you can't just give this to people and hope for the best. So what we do is we help write the manuals and do the training. And usually what happens, it's like I said, the easiest way is just to determine what are the things you're most worried about. Why did you buy Zonar to begin with, or a GPS system to begin with? Let's just go after that now. Because we're already gonna add to your workload a little bit. You know, you have to say spend an hour a day looking at stuff, or 30 minutes a day. You can't look at everything, so let's look at those first ones. And then after a month or two, it really will become second nature. Just like when you got your first smartphone, at first it took a long time to navigate around, and now you probably do it with your eyes closed with one hand. Same idea.
Zonar sent the trainers and team different times of whatever we request. So when we wanted specific dispatcher training on the system, they would come down and do the dispatcher training. So they've been pretty good about responding to our requests for training on specialized departments.
And have they customized your tutorial in regards to actual implementation?
Yes, based on what we want to get back out of the system. The training is how should I put it, aligned with that.
I have a question on the TEF side. Does the system have the capacity to do an ignition interlock?
We don't, and by design, for a few reasons. One, in the event that there is an emergency and for some reason you did need to drive a truck, we didn't want to be responsible for being the ones that shut that truck down and you couldn't drive it. The other is when you link into the engine in that capacity, if it's one thing for us to make a mistake in a report that comes up, right? And your VIN number looks different than it should look, or the speed or the idle is off by some magnitude. It's quite another when you shut someone's truck down on the highway or something. So we haven't done that. All that being said, there are systems out there. I don't know if anyone that competes directly with us that are particularly similar in that way, but there are systems out there where you can't do that. But from a theft standpoint, we have a ton of recoveries. We had one with a utility fleet in Washington State recently. They had a specialized utility truck that was stolen, and in fact, it was like they were actually notified that the vehicle had been recovered before they realized it was gone. But they're targets because of the copper wire on there. So anyway, so they found that out. They went back and looked at the path of that vehicle. They saw that it had stopped at this one location for 3 or 4 hours prior to being left on the side of a road. So they looked at it, and since you don't know the name of the company, this isn't that embarrassing, but the first thing they did was to make sure it wasn't an employee. Like, okay, the employee does not live at this location, we're okay. They got a warrant and they went in there, and it turned, not only did they have all the spools of copper wire in their tool bags, but they had there was a whole bunch of motorcycle parts and other auto parts that these guys had stolen. There were like 6 people there. So that's really common. So that's the one way where you can go back and investigate after the fact. But on the other hand, if you know that a truck's out there and it's been stolen, you don't know where it is, what we can do is you can call into Zonar and we'll up that ping rate, so then every second it's reporting and telling you, okay, it's going down this street right now at X miles per hour, and locate it that way.
Excuse me, where do we stand with interest in implementation for municipal, county governments, and rental car agencies?
Rental car agencies, I don't believe we have any rental car agencies. We do have a lot of city and county fleets though. And even, in fact, the state of Colorado's DOT is getting ready to roll it out on their whole DOT fleet. So we do a lot of that. And that was actually, it went first, it was adopted with school bus first for us, and we're on over 100,000 school buses. And then city and county, because those two kind of work together. City and county were the next adopters. And then now we're actually moving, our fastest growing are in utility and construction, so more private sector now. We have a whole bunch, like City of Sacramento was one good example. City of Los Angeles is doing the same thing, City of Houston. I'm trying to think if we have a few school districts here in Hawaii, and Kamehameha Schools, which is private, they use Zonar on their whole fleet.
Well, the county, our county, we're not interested.
Yeah, I'd like to see some testimonials from other counties so that we could maybe work with DPW on that,
Yeah, and then the one other thing you would want, say if you talked with the City of Sacramento or Los Angeles County or whoever it is, you definitely want to talk with their labor representative. Because there's that's usually a pretty big hurdle. How do you get past the union? And it's been done over and over. There are specific ways to do that.
Yeah.
But it's good to hear it from the people that went through it versus my telling you.
Yeah. So I have a question. Sorry, Frank.
Go ahead.
You're a commissioner, so you go first.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just there.
So actually, my question is for Dave. It seems like the system is working well for like HELCO and fleet. But what about the auto industry? I mean, it seems like overall it could be perhaps something good.
Well, the insurance industry is going with a very generic telemetrics, like OnStar, and it's moving in. So for example, I just signed up with State Farm through Verizon. So the cell providers are providing the telemetric consumer product models.
Does similar type stuff like this?
Very basic, essentially more from the safety and safe driving. And then of course they have a host of a la carte features in regards for, you know, emergency notification, actually giving you certain alerts if you want to. So I see that area going into play. I do know there's some high-end, like Mercedes, Lexus, Infiniti, when they have issues with their vehicles, they actually have a plug-in that'll transmit data via telemetric system, but it's not on board per se. But my understanding is that's already in the works, it's coming, and exactly for that. So from a customer service perspective, it helps to provide a higher level of customer service and minimizing the need for a warranty repair, or actually for a non-warranty repair that's more a customer relations issue. So you're right, I mean, it is coming. I mean, they already have like a mobile version that they plug into the OPD2 that will transmit telemetrically to the manufacturer.
Do you think they've come throughout the whole entire auto industry?
Oh yeah, I do believe so, because one of the areas in reducing costs that right now has tremendous capacity is warranty repairs. I believe that at least 30% of all warranty repairs are actually considered to be more customer relations repairs versus actual mechanical repairs. And then of course the issue of the consumer having the inconvenience of having to schedule to bring their vehicle in and all of that whole concept. So like what Freightliner did, I do believe we're within that early generational areas. The technology has been around for the last 10, 15 years. For example, you got CarJack and a bunch of other stuff on Interlock, but it's been expensive because coverage hasn't been universal until, well, you know, the telemetric side with cell towers, the cell industry, I think has made it more affordable now.
And it wasn't always like we were talking the data, you know, and now it's a lot easier to sort through that data. Before, if you had, in this case, Freightliner has 70,000 trucks out there with our system on it, there was just no way to manage it. You know, even if they knew they wanted it, but it was like, how are we going to see all these trouble codes that are coming over? So I think that that's getting a lot easier, which will facilitate that move too.
To add what Ryan said earlier, David and Calvin expressed this earlier too, was that it's critically important. The county's going to look into something like this, talk to the regulators. Yeah. We did. We did it to them. And we started this on a while and we no longer use it. We are looking into a system statewide, but you need to drive the purpose, the primary purpose of why you want to do this. Not for disciplinary actions, whatever it's fuel optimization or efficiencies, blah, blah, blah. That's what the county needs to do by presenting to labor organizations first. If not, you're going to get a huge back.
So you do, so I have 3 questions, but I'll start with Marvin's. You do have a responsibility as Energy Advisory Commissioners to make recommendations to the administration on what you see as fit, so that, you know, in that context, when you said that to me, I'm thinking, wow, if we have the support of the Energy Advisory Commission, that certainly would help with whatever you want to call it, a sales pitch or whatever. My questions for Kelvin and Ryan are, I would imagine there'd be a decreasing return on investment after you get the low-hanging fruit, but there might be some outlying circumstances, like a guy hanging on a line that is just an infinity return. You know, so you're always going to have some incident out there, like an accident or something, that this will recoup itself instantaneously. So that will always occur, correct?
And Zonar is pretty good about rolling out new technology, and so we can adapt that to the already existing system. Something new that they might have come out with, as far as alerts or
data or whatever it is.
Yeah, so you still feel like it's a very good value in year 2,
It's
3,
ongoing,
4,
and I
5?
think, yeah.
You feel the return on investment remains high, or is it a decreasing return on investment?
No, I think it's level.
A level return on investment
And
approximately.
that's gonna help us all the way through with our life cycle costs. You know, we collect all that data for purchasing decisions. So one of those residual benefits, you don't see that. 5 years from now, what kind of truck we're gonna buy, what kind of vehicle we're gonna buy. And then going forward from that 5 years to the next 10.
Yeah,
It'll cost us so much.
okay.
So we're always trying to see how we can reduce costs.
I see. And then the final question is to David's comments is I could see a lease situation where the dealer would want this kind of diagnostic and the county or whoever the entity would want it too. So they could see, is it a warranty issue or did the guy just, hit a goat? Or what is it? So I could see this county buys its vehicles, so I don't know if you guys get into the fidelity of where leasing is so much more cost effective, but I've been told by the federal government that leasing is, the way to go with, if you have a large fleet. The county has a huge fleet at about 1,000 vehicles, and maybe 400 personal cars, I think, but anyway.
In this case, just as it relates to Zonar, as the fleet rotates and turns over, you could always take those same units and just pull them out as you release the old vehicles and put them into the new ones. The one other point you made about recovering a return on investment year in, year out, theft recovery is a big one. So like in the case of that utility truck we were talking about, like that was a $100,000 recovery right there. They paid for all their units that they have. So if you get one incident like that per year, that alone, beyond just the savings that you're recouping on idle times and all those other things.
We live on an island, so if someone steals your bike, you can find them.
Well, it happened. Goodfellow had that on Oahu. They had a truck stolen recently, and it was funny. They told me, they said, like they should have seen the unit. They stripped everything else, but they left the unit in there, and they found it with a tarp over it in some driveway on Oahu. Yeah.
And that's the problem here, Will. They strip the units. That's why we get about 3 or 4 used Tacomas stolen a year. Recovery is like less than 5%.
Sorry.
Because they strip them for parts, and they don't sell them as whole. They strip them. The car is worth more in parts than it is as a whole.
Does that hurt your business?
Oh no! Again, it's a cost of doing business, but at the same time, someone pays for it, right?
Yeah.
Which is the consumer ultimately. So, but yeah, it unfortunately we have a little different problem because of it's harder to get it somewhere else. They'll strip it, and they'll do it within like 72 hours of being stolen. Because we found, the 2 times they found the vehicle, it was down to literally just the frame and the chassis.
Yeah, what's the most important part that they strip?
Oh, it's the most popular car stolen in
No,
Hawaii.
but if you put a device on one particular part.
Well, no, the context is that you have a higher propensity once it's reported or it's not where it's supposed to be. That short time frame allows you for more ability to drive.
Right.
So even though they started to strip it, that your recovery opportunity is shortened tremendously, yeah.
Yeah, unless they're really good.
Now, the other thing too, the sad reality is car theft is not a high priority for most police departments. Okay, so if there is an easy way to help to get it found, it becomes an easier opportunity to act on it faster.
And if you call and say, I'm looking at it moving down the road right now.
Exactly.
That's actionable.
Exactly, yeah.
The one thing we didn't talk about, and because I was trying to keep it energy focused, but as far as theft recovery goes, we have another device that I didn't talk about pretty much just for that purpose. It's actually twofold. 1 for theft recovery and 2 for utilization that you would put on, say, trailers or the aero boards that go on the side of the road to route around construction sites, things like that. That one can be stolen, not so much the aero board getting stolen, but trailers frequently get stolen. Often they get stolen with equipment on them. Or 2, utilization. Those are the kinds of things, light plants, where it's easy to get left behind on a job site. They might sit there for weeks, and then maybe, I'm not sure how it works from an accounting standpoint, but maybe you're renting a light board, aero board on another site when you have this unused one over here. So we have another unit, it's a battery powered unit, and it just tells you location. It doesn't give you any of that diagnostic data or anything. It's more for like equipment versus vehicles.
We have that on all our trailers.
Okay, Ryan, do you have any case studies? I know we're talking about how we might present this to the county. And, you know, it obviously would be helpful to present case studies of other municipalities and the kind of savings and return that they're seeing on their investment in this. And, you know, it's easy to monitor the savings associated with reduction in fuel costs, but some of these other areas where you talk about savings are much softer and much more challenging in terms of coming up with the actual numbers associated with savings and how those factor into the return on investment. Have you attempted to do anything like that?
Yeah, we do it all the time. So when we run a pilot, we have a spreadsheet of all these points that we consider areas where you could return on investment. So the first couple weeks of that pilot, we baseline, you know, this is what you're doing currently, and here's all these areas that we can look into. For example, the one kind of obscure one would be the time you save on work order management that we talked about. But 3 or 5 minutes per work order for 2,000 work orders is a lot. And you can put a number to it because you pay that person X amount of dollars per hour, you know, so yeah,
So
we do a big.
What are some of the collective then returns, taking into account all of these avenues of savings beyond just the fuel, but including fuel? What do you talk about in terms of return numbers?
I'll put it this way, if when managed well, and I don't mean even excessively managed well, but managed pretty well on a basic use case, you'll easily recoup the cost of the system and the service that you pay for it.
In what time frame?
We'll say, give it like a 3 to, even in the long, we'll say 6-month time frame just to get used to it, learn the system, train, make sure everyone's really adopted it. And then the following 6 months, you can see that return easily in that amount of time. A lot of those things can happen virtually overnight. The key to it though is following up and continuing to manage it, because one thing that'll happen is once it's in there, people are aware that they're being tracked, and so then you'll see something overnight. It's a lot like the inspections. You know, once you get people actually doing the inspections, all of a sudden you're flooded with defects being reported. The key is to continue to manage it though. So once
Steve is asking is getting the municipality data, so something that we can use to compare with. And to
yeah.
see if that's going to be helpful, because I would imagine that our RFP will need to go out discussing with the DPW or one type of county department before we even take that step.
I'll tell you what, when
data is going to be important too.
Yeah, a case study that shows what these other places are saving and how quickly their money's returned, that's a real convincing argument to be made. And so if you can present it in that way, in addition to all, you know, the qualifications regarding the benefits, you know, then I think you're talking about an easier sale ultimately. Now, Will, is there in Public Works 1 or 2 people or whoever that manage the entire fleet, or how is that managed?
Yeah, and Don can talk more about this because he's visited them often and knows them personally, but I believe there's 1 or 2, starting with Randy Riley, and, you know, under him is Ted Toriana, who you may all know. They have, you know, intimate knowledge of the fleet and its maintenance expenditures, and I'll just add that I could send the National Renewable Energy Lab report to Ryan, which talks about our fleet and its age, which is average of like 20 years. And we own it all, and, you know, just with, you know, National Renewable Energy Lab looking at fleets around the country, they're just like, you know, there's at least 20% of this inventory that, you know, we don't have to, you know, use. So, to answer your question, maybe Don has a contact that within DPW. It would be great to work with him because he knows a lot of those guys personally.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely make contact and set up a meeting or something like that. Just let me know, we can set it up.
Now should we formalize a committee on this task?
If I could, we have 2 options only because what this is brought up.
Am I allowed to say this, or is this your?
One of the things, and Margaret is here. Okay, good. Excuse me, are there any further questions to Ryan? Because then we'll have a discussion of how to move to the next step. Right, and do you have your contact information, Ryan?
I do, I have cards down there, and when we wrap up, I can give you guys.
And if you do have some examples of municipalities, I think Steve brought up a good point, on one, on a pre-visit meeting, they were looking at the system, there was a preliminary analysis done, and then after it was initiated. That's a great point, Steve. I think if you've got a couple of those, I know some commissioners are very interested to see that information, if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Of course, we have
fantastic.
dozens.
Like, I think Steve's right, Steve is relieving, and from that perspective, the buy-in becomes, at least on a sit-down, I think, more palatable, per se. And then, of course, the issue regarding the education on ensuring that the people who are gonna be actually using it understands the purpose and what's it used for. With that being said, if there's no further questions, then what I'd like to bring up is what you brought up, Marvin, is the action. Any other further questions to Ryan? Okay, and you're welcome to stay if you wish.
Okay, yeah, I definitely will.
Great. There's a couple different ways. One is through forming a committee with, within the, which we do have, and that's one of transportation is definitely in there. And this actually, I think, crosses over, from my perspective, to education and outreach, though. And let me explain why. I think sometimes, well, I'll give you a personal example. Although I know I'm supposed to take my cholesterol pill a certain time every day, do I actually do it? I think it's like that bitter pill, that horse pill kind of analogy, right? I mean, it's good, but something, I guess because we're a human being, between the brain and the common sense of the application, it doesn't sync sometimes. Yeah. But that being said, one of the things I did ask Margaret is having a committee formed under the commission does not necessarily give the opportunity to leverage for interface along with commissioners and the public. Now, I'm not saying the spirit of the Sunshine Law needs to be adhered to, but the Sunshine Law makes it sometimes very difficult to get nitty-gritty, getting down to what I call brass tacks. And then having to be concerned that a commissioner has an expertise in an area, you call in that individual, and then it links to another. So, but one of the things I asked is I believe as long as there's very specific outcomes that we want to achieve in a very specific time frame, I wanted for us to consider taking some of these very important matters that has low-hanging fruit, which I think this one potentially could be, but form a task force. Okay, and then within the task force, there'll be a committee chair and a vice chair at a minimum, and then that task force would be able to invite other members of the community, interact with other commissioners, and also any other public officials or private officials. And again, we're not skirting Sunshine, but it allows for that interaction to happen without having to feel that we violated Sunshine. So you still go with the spirit from the public interaction piece. Public is, so if you have a committee or if you meeting, task force meeting, the public is always invited to attend. So that, from my perspective, I believe still needs to be adhered to. So this may be an issue to consider a task force specifically for that. Again, very specific. We know what the outcome's going to be, very specific in a time frame. And again, it allows for that opportunity. So that's one way. Of course, the next way is the formal committee structure that we have. And but that would be subject to Sunshine. And the biggest disadvantage of that, unfortunately, is more the interaction with fellow commissioners. Okay, now, that's not to say that is good or bad, it just determines how quickly we'd like to get something done and still be accountable to the public as well. And of course, in this case, the law. So that's up for discussion. I mean, Margaret, we can discuss that because it brought up, or should we move into our agenda?
I would actually prefer if you bring it up under item 7, because or not 7, under 8, new business establishment of working committees.
All right.
If you're talking in this context under agenda item 5, an already established subcommittee on this group? Is there any?
There is some transportation, correct? I mean, based on
Well,
what I.
that was the last commission. I don't know that this commission being reformulated
Yeah,
has
if
established
it's,
any
yeah,
committees.
so if it's a different members, then yeah, then let's talk about it under
So could we defer to that? Is that okay?
agenda item 8.
All right, thank you. Okay. With that being said, Will?
Do you want me to present? Why don't
That's
you-
on the agenda.
You're next on the agenda.
Okay, if the commission feels that they've had, enough to digest with transportation,
Well, let me ask you, how long do you believe that?
I could go a long time. There's a lot to cover.
5 minute break.
Pardon?
5 minutes.
5 minute, okay, so why don't we adjourn for a 5-minute break, and then we'll, at that point, we'll see how much we can stomach and see, and go from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, you got food.
Well, that's true too. All right, but by the way, after the 5-minute break, we'll come back and indicate straight time frame that we should try to hear you. Understand this time as well.
Harry, you
Yes,
drove
sir.
over this morning.
Yeah.
Good on you.
I was promised a big show.
What do you want to do? I don't like to fill everybody out. Like, this is a great topic. If we could move just one issue.
Oh, no, I started probation.
Give us
I was out of there every day. I did. I'm sure you feel that. So I've been out of there for 10 years. Well, I was there to heat.
That's a game changer. If we can do it today, actually accomplish something, I'm gonna go all over the place. I'm gonna do this on my matrix. So matrix is great.
I would say please do your
Parking lot, what's being, instead of taking it out, run trenching, and all that,
over these
holes in it.
So, and as far as your reference, what I recommend, that's it. You can do that because this is not a public.
This is you got a hot topic.
Right, so what I'm saying is, but from your perspective, what you feel.
They're right at the airport over here. Our systems are in there. I don't know if you've seen it or going if you drive through,
That's fine, so we can
newer parking lots that they built, but we have a bunch of systems that are and they felt the market is more economical to go that route, especially over here, because all the parking lot and everything. Trenching and so, yeah, we've got them all over the state. Solar lighting.
We don't get this one.
So, yeah, I don't know if you guys at the gas, I've never come to
That's why, so from my perspective,
you may have applications as well, certain, I like substations, we get substations for utilities.
Alright, so that was the concept of.
Oh, you did? Oh, you
I'm
built
just
it.
I'm a tough student. I'm a hard learner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, everybody's doing that.